Well, goedendag from Nijmegen in Holland. I am here. This video is slightly different. I'm doing it a little bit backwards from what I did before. In that the videos I'm going to show you a little bit later in this one have already happened. I am just down by the River Vaal, just a couple of minutes from my really kind of cool hippie commune barge Airbnb, which I got because the windows of it look right out onto the bridge. And so about 3 minutes walk from where I was staying, I found that I was in actually one of the places where Colville was. Now, Port Crow was really cool because I was there at the same time that he was there. That same night of the invasion that happened at the beginning of Operation Dragoon, but I know that I wasn't where he was. He was at the back of a landing craft. However, I came to this spot down by the edge of the river, and I'm just going to turn the camera around to show you. I came to this spot yesterday, and I realized that I was sitting exactly where Colville must have been when he did the sketches for a bunch of his drawings that you can see here. What was kind of fun as well too is I kind of realized that I was sitting underneath this. This beautiful willow tree. And I thought, well, of course, that's where he was sitting. He was sitting underneath that willow tree. Some nice shade and a good place to draw pictures. But then I Googled it, and willow trees apparently are fairly young-lived trees. They only live between 50 and 70 years. So that tree, as it is now, would not have been there when he was there. But I have to say, it was so cool to be in the spot, obviously, where he did that drawing. I think right off the bat, when I started imagining this project, I was excited about the bridge at Nijmegen because I knew I could be exactly where he was. There's something to go by. Now, if you look at a lot of the different sketches, you see how he's kind of changed and made composites. So it's not like he sat down with a camera and took one shot. He did a number of sketches and then put together something that he really wanted to work. It's kind of fun as well too, because in some of the shots, like on the other side of the river, I'll just turn you around so you can see this. Way over there on the other side of the river is there's a steeple sticking out. That's in the town of Holland. And it appears in some of the drawings that he did. It's not there in some of the other ones that he did. So it was really cool to be able to see the way that those things were put together. There's a number of other drawings that are further down the river from here, and I kind of try to get down there, but a lot of them are blocked off. There's farmlands, and so there's some barbed wire fences. I actually did. There's a lot of construction right now going on the bridge, so it was also challenging for me to get in exactly the spot right up on the bridge from where he did that famous painting that he turned into one of the oil paintings, the bridge at Nijmegen. I may or may not have hopped a barrier and walked up the stairs. I did not get anywhere. I definitely did not get anywhere near traffic, but yes, I needed to get that shot. So here we are. So what significance does this place have? That bridge was hugely important. We all know about the D-Day landings, the Normandy invasion, which happened on June 6th. In movies, and we know that those were incredibly hard, and a lot of people died. But they managed to make it pretty far through France. And so that was, extremely successful. The Germans retreated a lot, and they rushed through Belgium, through Holland, and the Allies came barreling after them, and it looked like things were going to go really, really, really well. When the Germans got kind of through Holland, and in Holland and the Netherlands, people saw these retreating Germans and thought, oh, this is it, the war's over. But at some point, two things happened. The Germans realized all this time of retreating, suddenly we're in great numbers, and if we turn around, we might be able to put up a pretty good defense. And the other thing is that the supply lines from the Allies, from the Normandy beaches and that area, started to run thin. Basically, they had a hard time getting gasoline, they had a hard time getting resources. So the Allies were quickly able to kind of take Belgium, but when they got to the border in Holland, things ground to a halt. At that point, there was a really kind of ambitious plan that was created by Montgomery called Operation Market Garden. And the idea was to parachute troops all along the highway from Eindhoven, which is near the Belgian border, to Arnhem, which is near the German border. And the idea then is that these paratroopers would take all these important bridges, and General Horrocks and his XXX company of tanks would be able to run right up the highway, right across the Rhine, and basically be able to invade Germany very quickly. It didn't work out as planned. There was a lot more German soldiers here than people realized, a lot more German armor, and although a number of the objectives were met, i.e., and so this bridge at Nijmegen being taken was one of them, the British basically took the bridge at Arnhem. They were supposed to have to hold on to it for a day. It ended up being about 5 days. Very famous story, obviously. There's a book called A Bridge Too Far, and then there's a movie that was created by it. But eventually that they had to surrender. And so the bridge here at Nijmegen was as far as they were able to get. And as I'll mention later, the Canadians were tasked with holding on to this. So Colville spent a lot of time here. He spent, several months, or not several months, a couple of months, really drawing the day-to-day life of soldiers. And again, to be able to be right at that spot where he was very, very, very cool. I'm going to be renting a bike. Actually, I rented a bike, so you'll see. I can't pretend that it's earlier. I basically rented a bike today and went to Groesbeek and saw a couple of really cool things down there, and then ended up with the Canadian War Museum, Canadian War Memorial, and the cemetery. So I will pass you off to that. Well, I knew there were a lot of different sites in Holland, obviously, that are connected with the Canadian military here. And so today I decided to leave Nijmegen and take a trip out in the country. In fact, here's my little e-bike that I rented, which is quite fun, actually. There's a little an extra little motor in it, so you're still pedaling, but kind of makes you feel like you're Superman or on one of those walkways, those motorized walkways. Anyways, I'm about to head to the War Museum, not the War Museum, to the cemetery, Canadian War Cemetery, just north of Groesbeek down here. And I did a little research beforehand and found out that there was this. So this is called Zuidmullen, or the South Mill, basically, in Groesbeek. And this was where the Canadians were centered. I talked a little bit about Market Garden a little bit earlier, but this is where kind of the Canadians were mostly centered, and led to some bigger battles as well too. After Market Garden, the plan was to begin Operation Veritable, which was the battle basically to take the battle into Germany, essentially, because we're very close to the German border here. And apparently this site, this windmill, was a place where a lot of the plans were made. In fact, if I just take you over here, there's a plaque. There's also what's really cool is there's a flower shop in here, a bread shop as well too. I might try to bring something back with me. They still do it. So it says here, in the cupola of this mill was planned the spring offensive of 1945 by 400,000 British and Canadian soldiers, commanded by Canadian General Harry Kruger, that cleared the Rhineland up to the Weser and allowed irresistible Allied armies to cross the Rhine and end the war. So basically they met here, Commander Lieutenant General Simmons and Horrocks. Now Horrocks was part of the beginning of Market Garden. His XXX company was the company of tanks that were supposed to be able to take the bridges and didn't make it all the way to Arnhem. They climbed to the cupola to relate the terrain to their maps and allot divisional objectives. So basically what happened here is the top of this windmill, which obviously has a great, I'll walk back out here, the top of this windmill, which obviously has a great view of the surrounding terrain, and Groesbeek as well too is, Groesbeek Heights is a kind of a higher territory, higher ground, so you can see much further. But basically all the Allied commanders met in this windmill to make the plans for the final push into Germany. And again, it's just kind of sitting here in the middle of this cute little town. Doing its thing and still making flour apparently, which I think is pretty cool. Well, I made it here to the Canadian War Cemetery and Memorial in Groesbeek. This is about 7 kilometers south of Nijmegen. I rented a bike and came down here and spent a little bit of time traveling around in Groesbeek. Obviously went to the windmill and then made my way up here to the cemetery. There are some beautiful parts of the world. There's lots of beautiful parts of the world, but there's something about the Dutch countryside. It is so peaceful and beautiful. I can't think of a better place for these Canadian servicemen to be laid. Here at the cemetery, there's about 2,300 soldiers. Sorry about the wind, by the way. It's a little bit windy out here. There's about just over 2,300 soldiers buried here, and most of them were killed fighting here in Holland or in Germany. General Crerar, who was in charge of the Canadian forces, didn't want any Canadians to be buried in Germany, so a lot of them were brought here after that. Obviously, in the middle of November, when Colville came to the Nijmegen area, the Canadians were tasked through late fall and the winter with holding the Nijmegen salient. That whole area, kind of southeast, essentially, of Nijmegen, which is kind of forms a little island between the Val River and the Maas River, and it was a long, hard time. And in fact, they were given orders to not just hold it, but to hold it aggressively, so that the Germans just on the other side of the border and very close to the German border here, completely suspected something was going to be happening and kept them on high alert all the time. So it was very active patrols, and it was really showing that there was a strong presence there. A lot of the people that are buried here from a couple of campaigns before the Canadians came into Nijmegen. They were fighting in the Scheldt, which is the Scheldt estuary, which is kind of the north shore of the waterway leading into Antwerp. And Antwerp was a really, really important port to gain. Basically, most of the other ports in France were much further south from here. So to be able to get a port that was more northern would mean a lot of extra Allied resources would be able to be brought into the area. And so the Canadians had to slowly progress along that north bank where the Germans were really entrenched, and kind of miserable terrain as well, too. The whole of Holland basically is, I think it's essentially basically underwater, or almost underwater, which is why you hear so much about dikes and canals and those kind of things. So flooding is a very, very common thing, and flooding was something that the Germans used as well, too, to hold back the Allies. So fighting through the Scheldt Valley was miserable and difficult, and I also think that the Canadians weren't given the resources that they needed, so there were a lot of Canadian casualties there. After the winter of 1944 and 1945, the Canadians and the British that were here in this area were ready to make the final push into Germany. And the first battle that happened after the time they were here was in what's called the Reichswald, which is just right over here. Basically, it's the forests that go through here. And again, it was very challenging. The Germans had flooded the area. There's a lot of trees. It's either trees or it's wetlands. So in either case, it's hard to move forward. But eventually, of course, the Allies did push into Germany and moved on. And eventually, obviously, the war was won. It's pretty sobering to kind of look at the number of tombstones that are here, and to just walk around a little bit and to see all those names, all those nationalities as well too. I mean, they're all Canadian, but like Canada now, there's so many people from so many places. It's one of the things which is so wonderful about Canada, and also interesting to see a lot of Jewish people as well too, because they're obviously fighting with a different thought, with a different goal as well to knowing what's going on. And in fact, tomorrow I'm heading into Germany, and I'm heading eventually to the concentration camp at Bergen-Belsen, which I think is going to be pretty impactful, especially after having been at the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam yesterday. But this is, like I say, it's really sobering to be here. It's one thing to talk about art and paint and visual representations and interpretations and all that kind of thing, but when it comes to it, war is about a lot of death and a lot of people dying as well. So I think it's really important important for me to be able to be at a place like this, which is not just the site of some great battle, but the site of great remembrance, which is really, really important as well. When I came across that memorial on I was unprepared. I had a little Canadian keychain that I left there, but this time, knowing I was coming here, I was able to get prepared. So down in Groesbeek, I was able to find a flower shop, and I thought I'd go for red Gerber daisies. Gerber daisies are very popular in my house, and obviously red for Canadian. And when I told the Dutch woman that ran the flower shop that I was taking these to the Canadian War Cemetery, she offered to put some, I guess those are baby's breath or something like that in there. So I think it's a very Canadian looking bouquet, and a chance for me to leave something here again, just to show all these folks that we're thinking about them. So that's about it from Holland. Tomorrow morning I'm off into Germany as I continue this incredible trek, and we'll talk to you from there.